The first rays of California's sun broke over naval amphibious base Coronado at precisely 0600 hours, painting the Pacific horizon in shades of amber and gold.
I know, but we need to stay calm and think this through.
Sarah Catherine Brennan stood alone in Communications Room 7. Her small frame silhouetted against the glow of tactical radio displays that hummed with encrypted traffic from operations spanning 3 continents. 26 years old. 5'2".
They're closing
Red
in.
auburn hair pulled tight in regulation fashion. Green eyes that missed nothing, though most men never looked long enough to notice. To them, she was just another tech, just a radio girl. Sarah's fingers moved across the MBITR tactical radio with the practiced efficiency of someone who had performed this ritual 1,000 times. Check frequency range. Verify encryption protocols. Test backup channels. The morning equipment inspection was as familiar as breathing. Yet she approached each step with the precision her father had drilled into her from the moment she could understand what discipline meant. Master Chief Nathaniel Brennan, SEAL Team 2, killed in action, Ramadi, Iraq, November 14, 2006. 18 years ago, Sarah had been 8 years old. The memory surfaced unbidden, sharp as broken glass. Her father kneeling in their Montana backyard, his weathered hands guiding her small fingers around the stock of a Remington 700. The rifle had seemed enormous, then impossibly heavy for a child. Feel that firefly, his voice rough as gravel but warm as summer rain. That's 60 pounds of trigger pull. When you master this, you master yourself. Breath control, patience. The ability to make one moment, one decision count for everything. He had deployed 3 weeks later. He never came home. Sarah blinked, forcing herself back to the present. The SATCOM terminal beeped, confirming uplink with the military satellite network. She logged the status, her handwriting precise and economical in the duty log. Behind her, the door crashed open with enough force to rattle the encryption key cabinet. Well, well. Early bird gets the worm, huh, radio girl? Sergeant Kate Hutchins filled the doorway like a wall of muscle and swagger. 6'3", 235 pounds of what he clearly believed was pure American fighting man. His uniform stretched tight across shoulders he'd built in the base gym, where he spent more time admiring his reflection than actually training. The kind of man who had never seen real combat but had memorized every line from every war movie ever made. Sarah didn't turn around. Sergeant, the equipment is ready for today's operations. All systems nominal. That's real sweet, sweetheart. Hutchins swaggered into the room, boots heavy on the linoleum. But maybe you should stick to your radios and leave the fighting to men who actually know what they're doing. You know the operators, the ones who do real work. She felt his eyes on her back, that particular quality of male assessment that made her skin crawl. The kind of look that reduced her to categories too small, too young, too female. Never mind that she held a top-secret clearance. Never mind that her communication protocols had coordinated 17 successful operations in the last 6 months alone. Never mind any of it. Sarah turned her face, composed into the neutral mask she'd perfected over years of this particular brand of casual contempt. Is there something you need, Sergeant? Hutchins grinned, revealing teeth too white to be natural. Just making sure you know your place, darling. Commander Garrett and his boys are wheels up in 4 hours for a real mission. Grown-up stuff. Wouldn't want you getting any ideas about playing soldier. Let them think you're weak. Her father's voice as clear as if he were standing beside her. Then strike. I'll make sure all communications equipment is mission-ready, Sergeant. Will there be anything else? For a moment, something flickered behind Hutchins' practiced smirk. Confusion, maybe. He'd expected her to bristle, to react, to give him the satisfaction of having gotten under her skin. Her calm robbed him of that victory, and he didn't quite know what to do with it. Yeah, there will be. You just remember who the real warriors are around here. He turned on his heel and left the door slamming behind him with adolescent emphasis. Sarah waited until his footsteps faded down the corridor. Then she allowed herself one long, slow breath. Her hands, she noticed, were perfectly steady. The shift ended at 1400 hours. Sarah secured the communications room, logged her departure, and walked across the sun-baked tarmac to the parking structure where her ancient Honda Civic waited. The car was 20 years old. Primer gray on 2 panels, but it ran. That was enough. The drive to her apartment took 12 minutes through the pleasant chaos of Coronado's streets. Tourists browsed overpriced boutiques. Joggers pounded the beachside paths. Somewhere a street musician played acoustic guitar with more enthusiasm than skill. It was all so relentlessly, aggressively normal that Sarah sometimes felt like an alien observing human civilization through glass. Her apartment was a 1-bedroom unit 3 blocks from the beach, small enough that the rent didn't completely devour her salary. She climbed the exterior stairs to the 2nd floor, her boots making hollow sounds on the metal steps. The door opened before her key touched the lock. Commander James Garrett stood in the entrance, his solid frame backlit by the afternoon sun streaming through the living room windows. 41 years old, 6 feet of lean muscle and accumulated scar tissue with gray beginning to thread through dark hair cut high and tight. His blue eyes were the color of deep water, and right now, they held the particular intensity that meant he was running combat calculations in his head. He was wearing civilian clothes, jeans, a faded navy t-shirt. In 2 hours, he would put on his combat gear and disappear into whatever classified nightmare the Navy had cooked up this time. "Hey," he said, his voice carrying that particular roughness that came from years of shouting orders over helicopter rotors and gunfire. "Hey, yourself!" Sarah closed the door behind her, dropped her bag. "You didn't have to wait up. Last time I checked, this was my apartment too." A smile ghosted across his face there and gone like smoke. "Besides, I wanted to see you before Wheels Up. Brief just ended. We're Oscar Mike at 1800. Oscar Mike. On the move. Military speak for the constant motion that defined their lives. Sarah moved into the kitchen, a space barely large enough for one person to cook and another to watch. She filled a glass with water from the tap, drank it in one long pull. Through the window above the sink, she could see a slice of the Pacific, gray-blue and eternal. "Where?" she asked. "Can't say. The usual." Which meant classified, which meant dangerous, which meant James would be gone for anywhere from 3 days to 3 weeks with zero communication. This was the rhythm of their marriage, presence and absence like breathing. Sarah turned to face him, leaning against the counter. Hutchins was his usual charming self this morning. James's jaw tightened. "What did he say?" "Nothing I haven't heard before. I'm just a radio girl. Should leave the real work to the real warriors." She kept her voice light, matter-of-fact. "It's fine. I've dealt with worse." "It's not fine." James crossed the small space between them in 2 strides, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "You're worth 10 of him. Hell, you're worth 20. He's a garrison commando who's never seen real action and probably never will." "I know that. You know that." Sarah met his eyes. "But the Hutchins of the world, they'll never know it, and that's okay. I don't need their validation." James studied her face, reading the micro-expressions that most people missed. After 3 years of marriage and 5 years before that of him keeping a careful, honorable distance, while she grew from the captain's daughter into a woman in her own right, he knew her better than anyone alive. "Your father would be proud of you," he said quietly. And there it was, the opening of the wound that never quite healed. Sarah looked away, focusing on the photograph that held pride of place on their small bookshelf. It showed 2 men in desert camouflage, arms around each other's shoulders, grinning at the camera with the particular brand of happiness that comes from having survived something terrible together. The photo had been taken in Ramadi, Iraq in October 2006. Master Chief Nathaniel Brennan and then Petty Officer First Class James Garrett. 4 weeks before Nathaniel died. "He made me promise," James said, following her gaze. "The night before that last patrol, we were on the roof pulling security and he started talking about Sarah, about how smart you were, how strong. He said if anything ever happened to him, I needed to look out for you. Make sure you didn't let the bastards grind you down." Sarah's throat felt tight. "You've kept that promise." "Trying to." James's thumb traced a gentle circle on her shoulder. "But you make it easy. You're the strongest person I know, Sarah. You just hide it better than most." The moment stretched between them waited with all the things they'd learned not to say. About the randomness of death, about the fragility of the life they'd built together, about how every deployment could be the last one. James broke the silence first. "I should go. Pre-mission brief at 15:30. Sarah nodded. They'd done this dance enough times to know the steps by heart. She walked him to the door, stood on tiptoe to kiss him. His arms wrapped around her, strong and warm and temporary. "Stay safe," she whispered against his chest. "Always do." A lie they both pretended to believe. "Love you, Firefly." The nickname hit her like a fist to the sternum. Her father's name for her. The one James had adopted after Nathaniel's death, a bridge between past and present. "Love you too." Then he was gone and Sarah was alone in the apartment that suddenly felt too quiet, too empty. Too much like a preview of a future she didn't want to imagine. She lasted 45 minutes before the walls started closing in. Sarah changed into running gear and hit the beach, her feet pounding a rhythm into the packed sand. As the afternoon sun turned the ocean into hammered gold. She ran until her lungs burned and her legs screamed, and the anxious energy coiling in her gut had nowhere to go but out through her pores. By the time she returned to the apartment, showered, and made a half-hearted dinner of scrambled eggs and toast, full dark had fallen. James would be airborne by now, gone into whatever black operation the government had deemed necessary for national security. Sarah sat on the couch with her laptop, trying to focus on the online logistics course she was taking to boost her promotion prospects. The words swam on the screen, refusing to resolve into meaning. At 02:27 hours, her phone rang. The sound cut through the silent apartment like a gunshot. Sarah grabbed the device, her heart already hammering before she saw the caller ID. "Colonel Dalton Wade, Base Commander." Ice flooded her veins. Commanders didn't call in the middle of the night unless something had gone catastrophically wrong. Her finger trembled as she swiped to answer. "This is Brennan." "Sarah." Wade's voice was smooth practice, the kind of tone refined over decades of command. "I apologize for the late hour. There's been a development. I need you to come to the base immediately." "What kind of development, sir?" She was already moving, pulling on clothes with one hand, while cradling the phone with her shoulder. "Is it Commander Garrett? Is the team?" "Everyone is fine. This is a separate matter. Communication equipment failure in the primary operations center. We have assets in the field that need coordination, and you're the only tech cleared for this particular system." He paused. "This is time-sensitive, Sarah. How quickly can you get here?" Relief and suspicion warred in her chest. 15 minutes, sir." "Good. Report to Building 47 Warehouse District. The side entrance will be unlocked. I'll brief you when you arrive." The line went dead. Sarah stared at the phone, her tactical brain already identifying the wrongness of the situation. Building 47 was in the restricted warehouse sector, not the operations center. And comm failures always had backup protocols, redundant systems, procedures that didn't involve calling a single technician at 2:30 hours. Trust your gut, Firefly. Always. Her father's voice as clear as the day he'd said it. Sarah crossed to the closet, to the lockbox bolted to the floor in the back corner. Her fingers input the combination on autopilot 11-1406. The date her father died. Inside the box, wrapped in an oiled cloth, lay the Beretta M9 that had been Nathaniel Brennan's sidearm for 23 years of service. James had given it to her on their wedding day, had pressed it into her hands with tears in his eyes, and said this was what Nathaniel would have wanted. She'd never carried it, never needed to. Sarah lifted the pistol, felt the familiar weight of it settle into her palm, checked the magazine. 15 rounds of 9mm hollow point, the kind that expanded on impact and didn't over-penetrate. She chambered a round, engaged the safety, and slipped the weapon into her waistband at the small of her back, covering it with an untucked flannel shirt. Probably paranoid. Probably nothing. But her gut was screaming. The drive to the base took 11 minutes through deserted streets. Sarah badged through the main gate, returned the sleepy guard's wave, and navigated the labyrinth of access roads to the warehouse district. This sector was always quiet at night, the massive buildings dark and silent like sleeping giants. Building 47 sat at the far eastern edge, separated from its neighbors by 100 yards of empty tarmac. No lights showed in the windows, no vehicles in the lot. Sarah killed her engine, sat in the darkness, and listened to the silence. Every instinct she possessed was telling her to drive away, to call someone, to do anything except walk into that building. But if there really was a comm failure, if there really were assets in the field who needed her expertise, she couldn't live with herself if someone died because she'd been too scared to do her job. Sarah climbed out of the Civic, clicked the door shut quietly. The night air was cool against her skin, carrying the salt and fuel smell of a military base at rest. Somewhere in the distance, a jet engine cycled through its startup sequence. The side entrance was unlocked exactly as Wade had said. Sarah pulled the door open and stepped into absolute darkness. She had perhaps half a second to register the wrongness before they were on her. Hands grabbed her arms with professional efficiency. A hood dropped over her head, plunging her into blackness. She felt plastic zip ties cinched tight around her wrists before she could even think about reaching for the M9. "Don't fight." A man's voice, American accent, Texas maybe, not Wade. "Make this easy on yourself, sweetheart." Sweetheart. The word ignited something primal in Sarah's hindbrain. She drove her heel down on someone's instep, felt the satisfying crunch of small bones breaking. The man cursed, his grip loosening for half a second. Not enough. Another set of hands grabbed her from behind, and then she was airborne, lifted bodily off the ground. She thrashed, trying to remember the escape techniques her father had taught her, but there were too many of them, and they were too strong and too professional. "Feisty little thing." The Texas voice again, closer now. "The colonel said you might be trouble. Guess he was right." A vehicle door opened. They threw her inside onto a hard metal floor that smelled of oil and gunpowder. The door slammed shut. An engine roared to life. Through the hood, Sarah heard multiple voices speaking in rapid-fire Russian. Not American military, not a drill, not a misunderstanding. This was real, and she was utterly, completely alone. The vehicle lurched into motion, and Sarah's mind began the automatic process her father had drilled into her from childhood. Count the turns, track the time, build a mental map, right turn. 5 seconds of straight driving, left turn, another straight section, this one longer. Maybe 20 seconds. The rumble of tires changed pitch, suggesting transition from asphalt to concrete. Still on base, they were still on base. The realization was somehow worse than if they'd left. This wasn't a random abduction. This was planned, coordinated, supported by someone with authority to move freely through a secured military installation in the middle of the night. Colonel Wade. The name surfaced in her mind with absolute certainty. His phone call, the isolated location, the timing right after James deployed. This had been a trap from the beginning. Sarah forced herself to breathe slowly, fighting the panic that clawed at her throat. She had trained for this in a way. Her father had made sure of it. Survival, evasion, resistance, escape. The 4 pillars of SEER training taught to a little girl through games and exercises that seemed fun at the time but had deadly serious purpose behind them. Remember, Firefly. Panic is the enemy. Fear is just information. Use it. 23 right turns, 17 left turns, 12 minutes of driving. The ground beneath the tires had gone from smooth concrete to rough gravel for the last 90 seconds. The vehicle stopped. The engine cut off. Hands grabbed her again, hauling her upright. She stumbled as her feet hit the ground, would have fallen if they hadn't been holding her so tightly. They marched her forward, her shoulders brushing against what felt like a door frame. The quality of sound changed. They were inside now. A large space, judging by the echo of footsteps on concrete. Someone ripped the hood off her head. Sarah blinked in the sudden fluorescent glare, her eyes adjusting to reveal a cavernous warehouse. Industrial shelving units stretched 30 feet high, loaded with wooden crates stenciled with military designation codes. The air smelled of cosmoline and metal and something else. Something that made her skin prickle with recognition. Fear. 6 men surrounded her. 4 wore the digital camouflage of Russian military, their AK-12 rifles held with the casual competence of professional soldiers. The other 2 wore American uniforms, but something about them was wrong. The way they stood, the cold calculation in their eyes. One of them was Sergeant Cade Hutchins. He grinned when he saw recognition dawn on her face. "Hey there, radio girl. Told you to stay in your lane. Guess you should have listened." Before Sarah could respond, footsteps echoed from deeper in the warehouse. 2 more figures emerged from between the shelving units. Colonel Dalton Wade walked like a man who had never doubted his right to command. 59 years old, with the kind of weathered handsomeness that came from a lifetime of outdoor service. His uniform was immaculate, ribbons and badges precisely aligned. The Silver Star, Bronze Star with V device, Purple Heart, the decorations of a war hero. Sarah had met him exactly twice, both times at official functions where he'd shaken her hand and said the appropriate things about honoring her father's memory. She'd thought he seemed kind. The man beside Wade was harder to read, 46 maybe. Slavic features with a scar that ran from his right eyebrow down to his jaw, pulling one corner of his mouth into a permanent half-smile. He wore civilian clothes but carried himself with military precision. Wade stopped 10 feet away, studying Sarah with the detached interest of an entomologist examining an insect. "I'm sorry it came to this," he said, and he almost sounded like he meant it. "I truly am. You're collateral damage, Sarah. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong husband." "What did you do with James?" The words came out steady despite the fear turning her blood to ice water. "Where is SEAL Team 5? Somewhere safe. For now." Wade clasped his hands behind his back parade rest. "They're not the problem. You're the problem. Or rather, you would be if I let you live long enough to become one." The man with the scar spoke for the first time, his English heavily accented but precise. "Colonel, we waste time. Kill her now, dispose of body, simple. Patience, Victor." Wade didn't look away from Sarah. "I want her to understand first. Call it a professional courtesy to Nathaniel Brennan's daughter." At her father's name, something cold and sharp crystallized in Sarah's chest. Wade gestured to the warehouse around them. "Do you know what we have here, Sarah?" The inventory of Warehouse 9 represents approximately $63 million in U.S. military hardware. M240 machine guns, Javelin missiles, AT-4 rockets, enough C4 explosive to level a city block. All of it slated for destruction according to official records. Obsolete equipment being decommissioned. He smiled, and Sarah saw the truth of him in that expression. The kind of corruption that had rotted from within so gradual that the man had convinced himself it was justified. Except none of it is actually obsolete, Wade continued. It's all fully functional, worth a fortune to the right buyers, and my friend Victor here represents buyers with very deep pockets. You're selling U.S. military weapons to the Russians. Sarah's voice was flat. You're a traitor. I prefer to think of myself as a pragmatist. Do you know what they pay lieutenant colonels, Sarah, what they pay full colonels? It's insulting. Decades of service, and what do we get? A pension that barely covers rent. Wade's voice hardened. I earned this, every cent, and I've been very careful. 4 years, not a single mistake. Until now, Sarah said. Victor barked a laugh. She has spirit, pity, Wade sighed. Yes, until now. You see, your husband wasn't supposed to be here. SEAL Team 5 was scheduled for deployment to Afghanistan 3 days from now. I arranged the timing very carefully, but then someone in SOCOM changed the operation schedule and suddenly James and his team needed to be elsewhere, which meant I had to adjust. The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. You sent them on a fake mission. I sent them to Cell Block D, Basement Level 3. It's a secured holding facility, very discreet. They'll be comfortable enough for the next few hours. At Zoro 200, Victor's men will execute them and dispose of the bodies. A tragic training accident. Happens more often than you'd think. Sarah's hands clenched behind her back, the zip ties biting into her wrists. And me? You made the mistake of being too observant. Too smart. You noticed Victor's men on base this afternoon. You took photographs. Wade pulled her phone from his pocket, waggled it gently. We can't have that. So unfortunately, you're going to suffer the same training accident as your husband. A grief-stricken wife, overcome with worry, perhaps drove recklessly and crashed her car into the bay. These things happen. People will ask questions. Let them ask. They won't find anything. Wade pocketed her phone. Now I have other matters to attend to. Victor, make sure she's secured. I want her alive until 200. Insurance in case Commander Garrett proves difficult to manage. Victor nodded. Of course. Wade turned to leave, then paused. He looked back at Sarah and something almost like regret crossed his face. Your father was a good man, he said quietly. One of the best I ever served with. It's a shame he had to die the way he did. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. What? Ramadi. November 14th, 2006. Nathaniel Brennan's last patrol. Wade's voice was conversational, almost gentle. I was supposed to be with him that day. Did you know that? But I had to stay back at base, command duties, so I sent your father's team to clear a suspected insurgent safe house based on intelligence I'd received. Sarah couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't do anything but stare at Wade's face as he delivered the words that rewrote her entire history. The intelligence was wrong. I'd been paid $50,000 to send an American unit to that specific location at that specific time. Local insurgents wanted to make a statement, and I provided them with targets. Wade's expression was almost compassionate. Your father died because of me, Sarah. My very first deal. Crude by today's standards, but it taught me an important lesson. Loyalty is a commodity like anything else, and Nathaniel Brennan's loyalty cost him his life. The warehouse spun. Sarah's vision narrowed to a tunnel, Wade's face at the center of it. The man who had shaken her hand at memorial services, who had called her father a hero, who had looked her in the eye and lied with such perfect sincerity that she'd never suspected the truth. Murderer. The word echoed in her skull louder than her heartbeat, louder than the blood rushing in her ears. Her father hadn't died serving his country. He'd died serving Dalton Wade's bank account. I see you understand now. Wade adjusted his uniform jacket. I'll leave you with that understanding. Consider it a gift. At least you'll know the truth before you die. He walked away, his footsteps echoing across the concrete floor. A door opened and closed, and he was gone. Sarah stood in the center of the warehouse, surrounded by armed men, her hands bound, her father's murder fresh and raw in her mind. Hutchins stepped forward, his earlier swagger replaced by something uglier. "Your SEAL husband ain't here to save you, princess. Nobody's coming. You're all alone." He turned to the Russians, gesturing to a metal chair bolted to the floor near the far wall. "Get her secured. The colonel wants her alive, not comfortable." They dragged her across the warehouse floor. Sarah didn't fight. She was calculating, observing, building a tactical picture of her environment the way her father had taught her. 4 Russians, 2 Americans, 6 total hostiles, all armed with automatic weapons. Multiple exits, but all likely secured. No windows at ground level. Concrete floor, metal shelving units providing potential cover. And underneath the chair they were forcing her toward, she glimpsed something that made her heart stop. A square green box with a digital timer display, C4 explosive. The timer read 083000, 8.5 hours. They shoved her into the chair, used more zip ties to secure her ankles to the chair legs. Hutchins checked the restraints personally, pulling them tight enough that the plastic bit into her skin. Comfortable. He leaned in close, his breath hot on her face. "You got about 8 hours to think about how you should have stayed in your lane, sweetheart. Then you and this whole warehouse are gonna be nothing but a smoking crater. Evidence disposal, clean and simple." He straightened up, grinning. "But hey, look at the bright side. You'll get to die just like your daddy, sent into a trap by the same man. That's poetry right there." The 6 men retreated to positions around the warehouse, 2 near the main entrance, 2 more flanking a smaller door to the left. Hutchins and 1 Russian took up station near what looked like a supervisor's office, elevated above the main floor. Then the lights dimmed to half power and relative silence fell. Sarah sat in the metal chair, wrists and ankles bound, a bomb ticking beneath her, and let herself feel the full weight of her situation. James was going to die. She was going to die. Wade would continue his treasonous operation, selling American weapons to America's enemies, and no one would ever know the truth. Her father had died for nothing. She would die for nothing. Unless... Sarah closed her eyes, forced herself to breathe slowly. 4 seconds in through the nose. Hold for 2. 4 seconds out through the mouth. The rhythm her father had taught her for controlling fear. When you're scared, Firefly, that's when you're most dangerous. Because scared means you have nothing left to lose, and a person with nothing to lose is capable of anything. She opened her eyes. The warehouse stretched before her, vast and full of shadows. The timer beneath her chair ticked down with mechanical indifference. 8 hours and 27 minutes now. 8 hours and 27 minutes to do the impossible. Sarah Catherine Brennan, daughter of Master Chief Nathaniel Brennan, began to plan. The first 15 minutes were the hardest. Sarah sat motionless in the metal chair, her breathing steady and controlled while her mind catalogued every detail of her prison. The warehouse was approximately 200 feet long by 100 wide, the ceiling lost in shadows 40 feet above. Industrial shelving units created a maze of corridors, each loaded with wooden crates bearing military designation codes. M240B machine guns, AT-4 rocket launchers, Javelin missiles. Enough firepower to equip a small army, or to destroy one. The 6 guards had settled into a rotation pattern. Hutchins and the Russian near the office seemed to be the command element, watching the main floor through grimy windows. The other 4 moved in pairs, one pair circling clockwise through the shelving maze while the other held static positions at the exits. Professional, disciplined, dangerous, but not perfect. Sarah closed her eyes again this time, letting her memory pull her backward through the years to a spring afternoon in Montana. She'd been 7 years old, playing in the backyard while her father worked on his truck. He'd called her over, held up a pair of plastic zip ties. "Want to learn a magic trick, Firefly?" She'd nodded eagerly, always hungry for her father's attention in those precious moments between deployments. Nathaniel had secured the zip ties around his own wrists, pulled them tight enough to bite into the skin, then he'd grinned at her. "Now watch close, this is important." He'd positioned his hands in front of his body, wrists together, and raised them above his head in one smooth motion. Then he'd brought his arms down hard against his abdomen, elbows, flaring out at 45-degree angles. The zip ties had snapped with a sharp crack. "It's all about the angle and the force," he'd explained, cutting away the broken restraints. "The locking mechanism is the weak point. You can shim it with something thin or you can break it with kinetic energy. But you have to commit. Hesitation means failure." He'd made her practice 20 times that afternoon. By the end, her wrists were bruised and her arms ached, but she could break zip ties with 90% reliability. "Why are you teaching me this, Daddy?" she'd asked. His face had gone serious in that way that meant he was about to say something important. "Because the world is dangerous, Sarah, and I won't always be there to protect you. So I need to know that you can protect yourself." 6 months later, he'd deployed to Iraq for the last time. Sarah opened her eyes. The memory was sharp enough to hurt, but it gave her what she needed. Focus, purpose. The ghost of her father's voice guiding her through the darkness. She tested the restraints carefully, keeping her movements minimal. The zip ties around her wrists were standard military issue, rated for 200 pounds of tensile strength, tight enough to restrict blood flow if she didn't move carefully. Her ankles were similarly bound to the chair legs with 2 ties each, and those would be harder to address. But first things first, Sarah took stock of what she had. Her flannel shirt, jeans, boots, no phone, no knife, no obvious tools. The M9 that had been tucked into her waistband was gone, confiscated during the initial struggle, but they'd missed something. In her hair, secured with careful positioning, were 3 bobby pins. Her father had taught her to always carry improvised tools. "You never know when you'll need to pick a lock or shim a restraint," he'd said. "Something small, something they won't think to search for." Sarah began working her head from side to side, a movement that could be mistaken for discomfort or restlessness. She felt the pins shift in her hair, carefully dislodged by the motion. It took 8 minutes of patient effort before one pin slipped free and fell into her lap. She froze, watching the guards. None of them had noticed. Sarah arched her back slightly, creating slack in her bound wrists, and used her thumb to maneuver the bobby pin into her palm. The metal was thin and flexible, perfect for what she needed. Shimming a zip tie required inserting something narrow between the ratchet teeth and the locking bar. The bobby pin was just wide enough. Sarah bent it open with her fingers, feeling for the right angle, then began the delicate process of working it into the tiny gap in the restraint. Her father's voice in her memory. "Patience, Firefly, slow is smooth, smooth is fast." 23 minutes after they'd secured her to the chair, Sarah felt the bobby pin slide home between the ratchet and the lock. She applied gentle upward pressure while simultaneously pulling her wrists apart. The zip tie loosened, not broke, not released, just loosened enough that she could, with careful manipulation, slide one hand free. Sarah kept both hands behind her back, maintaining the appearance of being fully restrained. Her heart hammered against her ribs, adrenaline singing through her bloodstream. She forced herself to breathe slowly, to think tactically. One hand free was progress, but she was still ankle-locked to a chair, surrounded by armed men in a warehouse rigged to explode in just under 8 hours. The timer beneath her chair read 07:52:00. She needed to move faster. Sarah retrieved a second bobby pin from her hair, this one requiring less finesse now that one hand was mobile. She leaned forward as if in discomfort, using the motion to mask bending down toward her ankles. The zip ties on her legs were visible to anyone who looked directly at her position. She would have to work by touch alone, keeping her upper body still while her free hand snaked down to her right ankle. Lockpicking was a matter of feel and patience. Sarah inserted the bobby pin, probed for the locking mechanism, applied pressure. The first tie resisted. She adjusted the angle, tried again. Click. The restraint loosened. Sarah's right ankle was free, though she kept her foot in position to maintain the illusion of captivity. She was reaching for the restraints on her left ankle when footsteps echoed across the concrete floor. Sarah jerked upright, slipping her hand back into the loosened wrist restraint. She arranged her face into an expression of resigned fear, the mask of the helpless victim. Hutchins emerged from the shadows, his M4A1 slung casually across his chest. He'd removed his combat vest shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms thick with muscle and a tattoo of an eagle clutching lightning bolts. He looked relaxed, confident, predatory. "How you doing over here, radio girl?" He stopped 10 feet away, arms crossed. "Getting comfortable? You got a long wait ahead of you." Sarah said nothing. Her father had taught her that silence was often the best weapon against men who fed on fear and reaction. Hutchins frowned, denied the response he wanted. He stepped closer. "I asked you a question, sweetheart. It's rude not to answer when someone's talking to you." Still, Sarah remained silent, her green eyes fixed on a point somewhere past his shoulder. "Strong, silent type, huh?" Hutchins was 5 feet away now. "That's cute. Real cute, but let me tell you something about your situation. Nobody knows you're here. Nobody's coming to save you. Your SEAL husband is locked in a hole on the other side of this base, and in a few hours he's gonna be just as dead as you are." He leaned in his face, inches from hers. "So if I were you, I'd be real friendly to the guys who decide how comfortable your last few hours are gonna be. You understand what I'm saying?" Sarah met his eyes for the first time, held his gaze without blinking. When she spoke, her voice was steady and cold as winter ice. "My father was Master Chief Nathaniel Brennan, SEAL Team 2. He taught me that men like you are all the same. You talk tough, act tough, but you've never actually been tested. You're a garrison soldier playing dress-up." Hutchins' face flushed red. "You little—" "He also taught me," Sarah continued, "that the moment you think you've won is the moment you're most vulnerable, because arrogance makes you sloppy." "Yeah." Hutchins straightened up, one hand, dropping to the pistol on his hip. "And what exactly are you gonna do about it, tied to a chair?" Sarah smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "This." She drove her freed right foot up and forward in a devastating snap kick that caught Hutchins directly in the groin. He folded with a strangled gasp, and Sarah was already moving. Her left hand ripped free of the loosened restraint and grabbed for the Ka-Bar knife sheathed on Hutchins' belt. The blade came free with a whisper of steel on leather. Sarah slashed through the remaining ankle restraint and rolled out of the chair as Hutchins lurched toward her, his face purple with rage and pain. He was still twice her size, still stronger, still dangerous despite being hurt. But Sarah had surprise and 20 years of training that most people had never suspected existed. Her father had started teaching her Krav Maga when she was 6 years old, not the watered-down civilian version taught in strip mall dojos, but the brutal, efficient combat system designed for Israeli special forces. Every technique aimed at vulnerable targets. Every movement designed to end fights quickly. Hutchins swung a wild haymaker. Sarah ducked under it, stepped inside his guard, and drove the heel of her palm up into his nose. Cartilage crunched. Blood exploded across his face. She followed with a knife hand strike to his throat, not hard enough to crush his windpipe, but enough to make breathing difficult. He staggered back, trying to bring his rifle around, but Sarah was faster. She swept his legs with a low kick, sent him crashing to the concrete floor. The M4 clattered away across the smooth surface. Sarah dove for the rifle, her fingers closed around the pistol grip just as Hutchins grabbed her ankle and hauled her backward. She twisted, bringing the K-bar around in a desperate slash that opened a gash across his thigh. Hutchins roared in pain and rage. His fist caught her in the ribs, a blow that drove the air from her lungs and sent white sparks across her vision. But Sarah held on to the knife, held on to consciousness, held on to the cold clarity that combat demanded. She brought the knife up and buried it in Hutchins's thigh, aiming for the vastus lateralis muscle. Deep enough to disable, not deep enough to hit the femoral artery. She needed him alive for information. Hutchins collapsed, clutching at the wound. Blood seeped between his fingers. "You crazy bitch," he gasped. "They heard that they're coming." Sarah grabbed the M4A1, checked the chamber. Loaded, safety off. 30 rounds in the magazine. She pulled 2 spare magazines from Hutchins' vest, shoved them in her pockets. Footsteps pounded across the warehouse floor. Multiple sets, moving fast. Sarah glanced at the timer under the chair. 07:41:00. No time for subtlety. She shot out the nearest overhead lights with 3 precise bursts, plunging a third of the warehouse into darkness. Then she moved, using the shelving units for cover, navigating by memory and the faint glow of emergency exit signs. The warehouse became a maze of shadows and steel. Somewhere behind her, Hutchins was screaming for help. Ahead, she heard rapid conversation in Russian. The guards were coordinating, moving to box her in. Sarah reached into the pocket where she'd stored her mental map of the warehouse layout. During the drive here, during her time in the chair, her mind had been building a 3-dimensional model based on sound and glimpse and tactical reasoning. She knew approximately where the exits were, where the guards had been positioned, where the primary concentration of weapons crates was stored. She needed to even the odds. Sarah found what she was looking for on a shelf at eye level, a wooden crate stenciled with M67. Fragmentation grenades. She used the K-bar to pry the lid open, grabbed 2 of the green metal spheres, and continued moving. A figure appeared at the end of the aisle, backlit by emergency lighting. Russian, judging by the uniform, he raised his AK-12, shouted something. Sarah was faster, 3-round bursts to center mass. The man went down hard. Guilt tried to surface, but Sarah pushed it away. These men had been prepared to execute her, to murder James and his entire team. They'd made their choice. She was simply surviving the consequences of that choice. She grabbed the fallen Russian's weapon, checked his vest. 4 magazines for the AK-12. A radio clipped to his shoulder. She took both, left the rifle. The radio crackled with urgent Russian. Sarah's language skills were limited to basic Spanish and a handful of Arabic phrases, but tone and urgency were universal. They were coordinating a sweep pattern, trying to pin her down. Sarah pulled the pin on one of the M67 grenades and rolled it down a perpendicular aisle away from her position. She covered her ears and opened her mouth to equalize pressure. The grenade detonated with a flat, brutal crack that echoed through the warehouse like thunder. Smoke and dust billowed. Somewhere someone screamed. Sarah moved in the opposite direction, using the chaos as cover. She climbed onto a shelving unit, scrambled up to the 2nd level where she had elevation and lines of sight. Below, 3 remaining guards moved through the smoke. 2 Russians, 1 American. They were being cautious now, professional. The grenade had taught them she was dangerous. Sarah steadied the M4 against the metal shelving, controlled her breathing. 4 seconds in. Hold. 4 seconds out. Her heart rate dropped from combat high to something manageable. Her vision sharpened. The American guard moved into her kill zone first. Sarah didn't recognize him. Just another traitor, another man who'd sold his oath for money. She put the red dot sight on his center mass and squeezed the trigger. 3-round burst. He dropped without a sound. The two Russians dove for cover, but Sarah had already shifted position, moving along the top of the shelving unit like a jungle cat. She'd spent half her childhood climbing trees in Montana, had learned to move silently across uncertain terrain. The metal shelves were just another obstacle course. One Russian broke cover trying to flank her last position. Sarah dropped him with a headshot from 30 yards. Clean, efficient, the way her father had taught her. The last Russian was smarter. He stayed in cover, used his radio to call for backup, but there was no backup coming. Just him and Hutchins, who was presumably still bleeding on the floor. Sarah descended from the shelving unit in silence, circling around to come at the Russian from an unexpected angle. She found him crouched behind a forklift, his AK-12 aimed at the empty air where he expected her to be. "Don't move." She spoke in English, the barrel of her M4 centered on his spine. "Put the weapon down slowly." The Russian froze. For a long moment, Sarah thought he might try something stupid. Then he carefully placed the AK-12 on the concrete and raised his hands. "Turn around, slowly." He complied. Mid-30s, with a face that had seen violence and dealt it in equal measure. His eyes were flat, assessing, looking for weakness. "You speak English?" Sarah asked. "Da, yes." "Where is SEAL Team 5 being held?" The Russian smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "You think I tell you you shoot me either way?" "Maybe. But I can shoot you in a way that kills you instantly, or I can shoot you in a way that takes 20 minutes. Your choice." The smile faded. He glanced at the bodies of his companions, at the blood pooling beneath them. When he looked back at Sarah, there was a new quality in his eyes. Not quite fear, but close. "Cell Block D, basement level 3. He rattled off coordinates that matched the location Sarah had triangulated from Wade's earlier conversation. "Electronic lock. Code is 01011962. January 1st, 1962. The date the Navy SEALs were officially established. Of course, Wade would use that. Arrogant enough to think no one would dare try to breach his secured facility. "How many guards?" "I do not know. I am warehouse security only." He hesitated. "But Colonel Wade, he has many men loyal to him. Maybe 20, 30. Sarah processed this. 30 hostile combatants between her and James. Plus whatever explosive surprises Wade had arranged at Cell Block D. The Russian watched her think. "You cannot win. Too many. Too well armed." "Maybe." Sarah adjusted her grip on the M4. "But I'm going to try anyway. Last question. What's the detonation sequence for the C4 in this warehouse?" His eyes widened. "You know about bomb. I know there's a timer. I need to know if there are fail-safes, anti-tamper devices, redundant detonators." The Russian shook his head slowly. "I do not know technical. Victor handles explosives, but I hear him say, 12 points. All connected. You cut one wrong, they all blow. 12 detonation points wired in series, exactly the kind of redundant system that made disarming bombs a nightmare. If Sarah made one mistake, the entire warehouse would vaporize." "Thank you for your cooperation." Sarah shot him in the thigh, the same place she'd stabbed Hutchins. Painful but survivable. "Crawl to your friend. Tie tourniquets. If you're lucky, someone will find you before you bleed out." She didn't wait to watch him comply. The clock was ticking. 07:22:00. Sarah moved through the warehouse with purpose, now gathering supplies. More magazines for the M4, a tactical vest that almost fit, night vision goggles, a suppressed Beretta M9 that made her heart clench because it reminded her of her father's sidearm. From a crate marked communications, she salvaged an MBITR tactical radio and a small GPS unit. From medical supplies, she grabbed combat gauze and quick clot bandages. Her ribs ached where Hutchins had hit her, and she was pretty sure at least one was cracked, but she couldn't afford to slow down. She found Hutchins where she'd left him conscious but pale from blood loss. He'd managed to tie a makeshift tourniquet using his belt. "You're making a mistake," he gasped as she approached. "Wade has the whole base locked down. You're just one person, you can't—" Sarah zip-tied his hands behind his back using the same plastic restraints he'd used on her. "Where's my phone?" "Wade has it. Command center." "Where's the C4 control panel?" Hutchins' eyes darted to the supervisor's office. "Up there. But you can't disarm it. Victor designed it. 14 different trigger mechanisms. You cut the wrong wire, you die. 12 points. 14 triggers." Sarah committed the information to memory. "Anything else I should know?" "Yeah, you're gonna die screaming." Sarah stood looking down at the man who'd called her radio girl, who'd underestimated her every step of the way. "My father always said the most dangerous thing in the world is someone with nothing left to lose. You and Wade took everything from me. That makes me very dangerous." She left him there and climbed the metal stairs to the supervisor's office. The control panel was exactly where Hutchins had indicated, a gray metal box mounted to the wall, its face bristling with wires and digital readouts. Sarah photographed it with the tactical camera she'd found in one of the equipment crates. She wasn't qualified to disarm this herself, but she knew someone who was, if she could reach him in time. The radio she'd taken from the Russian guard crackled with a new voice. Accented English. Volkov, presumably. "Warehouse 9 report status. Hutchins, respond." Sarah keyed the transmit button, pitched her voice low and rough. "Situation contained." A pause, then, "You are not Hutchins." "No, I'm the radio girl he underestimated. Tell Wade that Sarah Brennan is coming for him and she's bringing hell with her." She clicked off before Volkov could respond, smashed the radio against the concrete floor. No more hiding, no more pretending to be weak. Sarah Catherine Brennan descended from the office, checked her gear one final time, and headed for the exit. The timer on the C4 read 070400. 7 hours to save James. 7 hours to stop Wade. 7 hours to disarm a bomb she didn't fully understand. As she slipped into the pre-dawn darkness outside Warehouse 9, Sarah allowed herself one moment of doubt, one moment to acknowledge the sheer impossibility of what she was attempting. Then she heard her father's voice as clear as if he were walking beside her through the shadows. "When you're scared, Firefly, that's when you're most dangerous. Because scared means you have nothing left to lose." Sarah checked the suppressed M9 chambered around and started running towards cell block D. Behind her, Warehouse 9 sat in darkness, rigged to explode, counting down the seconds to oblivion. Ahead, somewhere in the maze of the naval base, 20 to 30 armed men stood between her and the people she loved. Sarah ran faster. The night swallowed her whole and the hunt began. The distance from Warehouse 9 to cell block D was 800 meters across open ground that offered almost no cover. Sarah moved through the pre-dawn darkness like a ghost, using every shadow, every parked vehicle, every angle of concealment that her father's training had burned into her muscle memory. The base was stirring. Morning PT formations would begin in 90 minutes. The changing of the guard, the normal rhythm of military life that had no idea a war was being fought in its midst. Sarah checked her tactical watch. For 7 hours. The C4 timer would read approximately 064700 now. James and SEAL Team 5 were scheduled for execution in less than 4 hours. She couldn't save everyone, couldn't disarm the bomb and rescue the team and stop Wade all at once. The mathematics of the situation were brutal and unforgiving, but she could try. Cell Block D rose from the tarmac like a concrete tomb, 4 stories of reinforced brutalist architecture with narrow windows that looked like arrow slits. It had been built during the Cold War as a secure detention facility for high-value targets, then mostly abandoned as newer, more sophisticated installations came online. The perfect place to hide a dozen Navy SEALs who weren't supposed to exist for the next few hours. Sarah circled the building from 200 meters out using the scope on her appropriated M4 to map the security. 2 guards at the main entrance, both American military but with the same wrong quality she'd noticed in Hutchins and his partner. 4 more roving in pairs around the perimeter. No visible sniper positions, but the roof access would provide excellent overwatch. 10 visible hostiles, possibly twice that number inside. The odds were impossible. Sarah smiled without humor. Impossible odds were just another Tuesday for a SEAL's daughter. She withdrew to a maintenance building with a clear line of sight to Cell Block D's south entrance and set up a hasty sniper position. The M4 wasn't ideal for precision work at this range, but it would have to do. She'd left the M40A3 that James had mentioned in her father's memorial locker. No time to retrieve it now. Sarah settled into the shooting position her father had taught her before she could read chapter books. Prone left leg bent for stability, right leg straight. Rifle butt firmly in the shoulder pocket. Cheek weld solid against the stock. Breathing controlled and rhythmic. Through the scope she could see the 2 guards at the south entrance clearly. Both carried M4A1 rifles. Both wore tactical vests. One was smoking a cigarette, the kind of unprofessional behavior that would get you smoked by any competent NCO. Sarah waited. Patience was the sniper's greatest weapon. At 04:53, the smoker's partner turned to say something, both men momentarily distracted. Sarah exhaled slowly and squeezed the trigger. The suppressed M9 coughed and the smoker dropped like a puppet with cut strings. His partner froze for half a heartbeat, trying to process what had just happened. That half heartbeat cost him his life. Sarah's second shot took him in the throat, dropping him beside his companion. She was moving before the second body hit the ground. The sprint across open tarmac felt like running through molasses, every second stretched to braking, while Sarah's combat-heightened senses screamed warnings about exposure and vulnerability. But she reached the south entrance without encountering resistance. Grabbed the access card from the dead guard's vest and swiped it through the reader. The lock clicked open. Sarah entered Cell Block D with the suppressed M9 leading, every nerve ending singing with adrenaline. The interior was exactly as grim as the exterior promised. Concrete walls painted institutional green, flickering fluorescent lights, the smell of disinfectant and old fear. The ground floor was deserted. Sarah moved to the stairwell, descended toward the basement levels. Each landing increased the pressure in her chest, the certainty that she was walking into an ambush. Basement level 1 was a warren of empty cells and abandoned offices. Sarah cleared each room with mechanical efficiency, her movements economical and precise. Nothing. Basement level 2 was where the trap sprung. She was halfway down the corridor when muzzle flashes strobed from both ends simultaneously. Sarah dove through an open doorway as bullets chewed chunks from the concrete wall where she'd been standing. 4 hostiles, 2 at each end of the corridor, coordinated fire designed to pin her in a kill box. Professional. Deadly. Exactly what she'd expected. Sarah pulled one of her remaining M67 grenades, cooked it for 2 seconds, and rolled it down the corridor to her left. The explosion was deafening in the confined space, followed by screams and the clatter of weapons on concrete. She swung around the doorframe and engaged the 2 hostiles on her right. 3-round burst center mass. Shift. 3-round burst center mass. Both targets down in under 2 seconds. The corridor to her left was obscured by smoke and dust. Sarah advanced through it, the M4 tracking for targets. She found one hostile alive but badly wounded, his AK-12 lying 3 feet beyond his reaching fingers. "How many more?" Sarah asked, her voice cold as winter steel. The man coughed blood. "Fuck you." Sarah shot him in the shoulder, the suppressed round punching through muscle and bone. He screamed. "How many more between me and level 3? "6," he gasped. "Plus Volkov. You're dead. You're fucking dead. Sarah zip-tied his hands and moved on. 6 more hostiles, plus the man who'd helped Wade murder her father and planned to murder her husband. The math was getting better. Level 3 access required the code the Russian had given her. Sarah approached the reinforced door, cautiously checking for tripwires or pressure plates. Wade was smart enough to booby-trap critical access points. She found the explosive charge mounted above the doorframe. Crude but effective. Anyone forcing the door would trigger a shaped charge that would turn the stairwell into a blast furnace. Sarah photographed the setup, then carefully traced the wires to their detonator. Simple pressure switch connected to the door's emergency bar. She bypassed it with a jumper wire, rerouting the circuit to a dummy load made from components she'd salvaged from the Level 2 offices. The door opened without incident. Basement Level 3 was different from the levels above. Cleaner, better maintained. The cells here were designed for long-term secure detention with reinforced doors and biometric locks. And standing in front of the central cell, calm as a man waiting for a bus, was Captain Viktor Volkov. He held a Makarov pistol loosely in one hand, the muzzle pointed at the floor. The scar running down his face pulled his mouth into that permanent half-smile, but his eyes were cold and calculating. Sarah Brennan. His accent made her name sound foreign. You have surprised many people today. Hutchins is fool. The guards are fools. But I am not fool. Sarah kept her M4 trained on his center mass finger on the trigger. Step away from the cell. Or what, you shoot me? Volkov shook his head. I think not, because the moment you fire the charges I have placed throughout this level detonate. Everyone dies, including your husband. A standoff. Sarah's mind raced through the tactical calculus. If Volkov was bluffing, calling it would end the threat immediately. If he wasn't bluffing, firing would kill everyone she'd come to save. You're lying, Sarah said. Am I? Volkov gestured with his free hand to a small device clipped to his belt. Dead man's switch. My heart stops, signal stops, bombs explode. Simple, elegant, Russian engineering. Sarah's finger tightened on the trigger, but she didn't fire. Volkov was many things, but he wasn't a liar. The dead man's switch was real. What do you want? She asked. To understand. You are a communications specialist, little girl playing with radios. How do you become this? He gestured to the bodies littering the stairwell behind her. 7 men dead. Maybe more at warehouse. This is not normal. My father was Master Chief Nathaniel Brennan. He taught me to be more than what people assumed I was. Understanding flickered across Volkov's face. Ah, the SEAL who died in Ramadi. Wade's first betrayal. He nodded slowly. I see now. This is revenge. Personal. This is justice. Justice. Volkov tasted the word. Interesting concept. Wade thinks he serves justice by selling weapons to highest bidder. Bypassing politicians and their games. You think you serve justice by killing men who follow orders? Me. He shrugged. I think justice is fairy tale we tell ourselves to sleep at night. Philosophy from a man holding a dead man's switch. How original. Volkov's smile widened. I like you. In different world we are perhaps allies. Both of us understand that survival requires difficult choices. I'm nothing like you. No. Volkov tilted his head. You killed 7 men tonight, maybe more. How many were just following orders? How many had families, but you killed them anyway because they stood between you and what you want? This makes you like me more than you wish to believe. The words hit harder than Sarah wanted to admit. She thought of the faces of the men she'd killed. Young men, most of them. Somebody's son, somebody's brother. But they'd made their choice when they chose to serve Wade's treason. The difference, Sarah said, is that I'm fighting to protect people. You're fighting for money. Money, power, love, revenge. Volkov shrugged. These are just different words for same thing. We all fight for what matters to us. Behind him, Sarah heard a faint sound from the cell, a voice she knew better than her own heartbeat. Sarah, is that you, James? Volkov saw the reaction on her face and laughed. Ah, yes, love. Most dangerous motivation of all. Makes people do stupid things. Makes smart women walk into trap. Let them go, Sarah said. This is between Wade and me. You don't have to die here. True, I do not have to die here. Volkov's expression turned serious. But I also do not let you pass, so we have problem with no good solution. The moment stretched taut as a bowstring. Sarah ran the calculations. Distance to target 12 meters. Reaction time to dead man's switch maybe half a second. Her shot placement would have to be perfect. Instant neurological shutdown. No muscle reflex. No dying twitch that would trigger the detonator. It was an impossible shot. But Sarah had been making impossible shots since she was 8 years old. I'm going to give you one chance, she said. Walk away. Go back to Russia. Tell them Wade is burned, the operation is compromised. You're a professional. You know when to cut losses. Volkov considered this. For a long moment, Sarah thought he might actually take the offer. Then he shook his head. Wade pays very well. And I am professional, yes, but I am also proud. I do not run from communications girl, no matter how many lucky kills she has. Then I'm sorry, Sarah fired. The suppressed round took Volkov in the right eye, punching through the orbital socket and into the brainstem. Instant death. No reflex, no muscle spasm. He simply ceased to exist, his body dropping straight down like a building in controlled demolition. The dead man's switch clattered to the floor, still transmitting its heartbeat signal. Sarah sprinted forward, grabbed the device, and held the trigger down. As long as the signal kept transmitting, the bombs wouldn't detonate. But her hand was now literally the only thing standing between everyone in this basement and oblivion. James. She reached the cell door, found the biometric lock. Can you hear me? Sarah, what the hell are you doing here? James's voice was rough with emotion and disbelief. How did you? No time. I need you to listen very carefully. I'm holding a dead man's switch. If I let go, we all die. The code to open this door is 0101-1962. There should be an override panel somewhere. Sounds of movement from inside the cell. Then James's voice steady despite the insanity of the situation. Found it. Entering code now. The lock clicked. The door swung open. James Garrett stood in the doorway, still in his combat gear from the aborted deployment, his face showing the wear of 7 hours in captivity. Behind him, 10 more SEALs crowded the cell, all of them staring at Sarah with expressions ranging from shock to admiration. James took in the scene with a single glance. The bodies in the corridor, the M4 in Sarah's hands, the dead man's switch she held in a death grip. We need to move, Sarah said. Wade rigged Warehouse 9 with C4, timers counting down. We have maybe 6 hours before this whole base becomes a crater, and I can't let go of this switch without triggering the charges on this level. Lieutenant Reese Callahan, the only other woman in SEAL Team 5, stepped forward. Ma'am, with respect, what the actual fuck? Despite everything, Sarah almost laughed. It's a long story. Right now, we need to disarm a bomb stop, a treasonous colonel, and figure out how to defuse whatever Volkov rigged down here. In that order. James's tactical mind was already working. Team split. Alpha Element 6 men with me, we secure the warehouse and work on the C4. Bravo Element 4 men with Callahan, you clear cell block D and secure our exit. Sarah? I'm coming with you, Sarah interrupted. Warehouse 9 has a control panel I photographed. You'll need me to walk you through it. You're also holding a dead man's switch that's keeping us alive. Sarah looked at the device in her hand, then at Volkov's body. She knelt carefully, examined the wiring. The dead man's switch was connected to a receiver unit on his belt. The receiver was connected to charges somewhere in the building. "Callahan," Sarah said. "You know EOD, basic level. Good enough. Take this." Sarah carefully transferred the dead man's switch to Callahan's hand. "The receiver is programmed to detect loss of signal. We need to find the charges and disarm them before we can safely release the trigger." Callahan's jaw tightened, but she took the device without hesitation. "How long do I have?" "However long it takes us to handle the warehouse situation." Sarah stood, turned to James. "We need to move now." The team grabbed weapons from the fallen guards, redistributed ammunition, and moved out with the practiced efficiency of men who'd trained together for years. They hit the ground floor of Cell Block D at a dead run, encountered 2 more guards who went down before they could raise the alarm. Outside, the sky was lightening to gray. 05:21 hours. The base would be fully awake in less than an hour. They were running out of darkness to hide in. Sarah led the way across the tarmac, James and his team moving in tactical formation around her. She'd spent 7 hours as a victim, as prey. Now she was the hunter, and the feeling was intoxicating. They reached Warehouse 9 without incident. The door Sarah had exited was still unlocked. The team flowed inside, weapons up, clearing corners and shadows with mechanical precision. Hutchins was where Sarah had left him, conscious but weak from blood loss. He looked up as the SEALs surrounded him, and something like fear finally cracked through his bravado. "Commander Garrett," he croaked, "this isn't what it looks like." James didn't spare him a glance. "Sarah, the control panel." Sarah led him to the supervisor's office, showed him the photographs on the tactical camera. James studied them with the focused intensity of a man defusing a live bomb, which was essentially what he was doing. 12 detonation points, 14 triggers, he muttered. "Redundant systems, anti-tamper switches. Volkov was good. Can you disarm it?" James looked at her, and she saw the truth in his eyes before he spoke. "Not in 6 hours, maybe not at all. This is beyond field EOD. We'd need a full team, specialized equipment time to map the entire circuit." Sarah's stomach dropped. "So we evacuate, get everyone off the base, and let Wade escape with his evidence, let him scatter in the wind." James shook his head. "He'll have fallback plans, safe houses, offshore accounts. If he runs now, we'll never find him." "Then what do we do?" James was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant. When he spoke, his voice was soft. "Your father once told me that the hardest decisions are the ones where every option has a cost. You can't win without losing something." Sarah understood. "We use the bomb. We reprogram the detonation sequence, target Wade's command center, the helipad, anywhere he might run." James met her eyes. "It's not perfect. Collateral damage is possible, but it's the only way to guarantee he doesn't escape." It was the ruthless calculus of war. Accept smaller losses to prevent larger ones. Sarah thought of all the innocent people on this base, the sailors and soldiers who had nothing to do with Wade's treason. Then she thought of her father sent into an ambush because of Wade's greed. Thought of James and his team hours away from execution. Thought of how many more people Wade would betray if he lived. "Do it," she said. James moved to the control panel. His fingers were steady as he began rewiring the detonation sequence, rerouting the triggers, changing targets. Sarah watched him work, this man who had known her father, who had kept his promise to protect her, who was now helping her finish what Nathaniel Brennan had died trying to stop. "Timer reset to 2 hours, James said. "New targets locked. We need to move." They descended from the office to find the team had secured the warehouse. Hutchins and the wounded Russian guard were zip-tied and under guard. The bodies had been moved to a corner and covered. "Bravo element reports Cell Block D secured," one of the SEALs said. "Charges diffused. Callahan has the building locked down." James nodded. "Good. Now we go hunting for Wade." But Sarah's attention had shifted to something else. On the floor near where she'd fought Hutchins, partially hidden under an equipment crate, was a familiar object. Her phone. She grabbed it, powered it on. The battery was at 15%, but it was functional. 3 missed calls, 7 texts, all from a number she didn't recognize. She opened the text thread. "Firefly, this is Reese Callahan. Your husband gave me this number. If you're reading this, you're alive. Stay that way. We're coming for you." Sarah showed James. He smiled grimly. "Callahan's good people. Reminds me of you, actually. High praise from a SEAL commander. I mean it. You fought your way through a warehouse full of hostiles, killed 7 men, and rescued a trapped SEAL team. All with skills you weren't supposed to have." James touched her face gently. "Your father would be proud. Hell, I'm proud." The moment stretched between them waited with all the things they'd survived, all the things they still had to do. It was broken by the radio crackling to life. "All units, this is Colonel Wade. We have a security breach in progress. Armed hostile female, 5'2", red hair. Shoot on sight. Repeat, shoot on sight." Sarah and James locked eyes. "He knows," Sarah said. "Good. Let him know. Let him be scared." James keyed his radio. "Colonel Wade, this is Commander Garrett. SEAL Team 5 is free. Warehouse 9 is compromised. Your operation is over. Surrender now and I'll make sure you live to see trial." Static. Then Wade's voice, cold and controlled. "Commander Garrett, I should have known you'd be trouble. No matter, I have contingencies. By the time your team secures my command center, I'll be airborne, and all evidence of my activities will be destroyed." "You rigged your own command center to blow," James said. "Not a question. Insurance. I learned a long time ago that you can't leave loose ends." Wade paused. "Tell Sarah I'm sorry about her father. Nathaniel was a good man, but business is business." The radio went dead. Sarah felt something cold and sharp crystallize in her chest. Wade was running with the evidence, running to whatever safe haven he'd prepared for exactly this scenario. "Where's the helipad?" she asked. James pulled up a mental map of the base. "North side, 1/4 mile from the command center. He'll have it secured. Probably has a pilot standing by." "Can we get there before he does?" "Maybe, if we move fast." James turned to his team. "Full combat load. We have one objective: stop Wade before he boards that helicopter. Non-lethal if possible. But if he resists, you are authorized to use whatever force is necessary." The SEALs moved with renewed purpose, checking weapons and adjusting gear. Sarah grabbed a tactical vest that actually fit, loaded it with spare magazines and equipment. James handed her something wrapped in cloth. "This was in your father's memorial locker. I had it brought to Cell Block D before the deployment. Figured I'd give it to you when I got back." Sarah unwrapped the cloth and found herself staring at an M40A3 sniper rifle. The stock was worn smooth from years of use. The scope showed the careful maintenance of a man who understood that his life depended on his equipment, her father's rifle. The weapon he'd carried through Grenada and Panama and Desert Storm and Somalia. The weapon he'd used to teach her to shoot when she was barely old enough to hold it steady. "I can't," Sarah whispered. "Yes, you can." James's voice was gentle but firm. "He wanted you to have it, wanted you to finish what he started. This is your moment, Sarah. Take it." Sarah lifted the rifle, felt the familiar weight settle into her hands. 20 years since her father had died. 20 years of carrying the weight of his loss. Maybe it was time to set that weight down. "Let's go," she said. The team moved out into the gray dawn stows among shadows, hunters closing on their prey. Sarah ran with them, her father's rifle slung across her back, her heart beating steady and strong. Somewhere ahead, Colonel Dalton Wade was preparing to escape justice. But Sarah Catherine Brennan, daughter of Master Chief Nathaniel Brennan, was about to teach him a lesson her father had learned too late. There's no escape from the truth. and the truth was coming for him at 3,000 feet per second. The hunt was almost over. The reckoning had just begun. The command center sat 200 meters to the east, a squat concrete building that housed the base's tactical operations. Sarah could see movement through the windows, guards taking positions, Wade preparing his escape. James split the team with hand signals. 6 SEALs would assault the command center from the front, creating chaos and drawing fire. Sarah and 2 others would move to the helipad and set up a blocking position. It was a desperate plan with too many variables, but it was all they had. Sarah broke away from the main element, running low and fast across the tarmac with 2 SEALs flanking her. The helipad was a concrete circle surrounded by fuel tanks and maintenance equipment. A Bell 412 helicopter sat in the center, rotors already spinning up to speed. A pilot in civilian clothes was doing pre-flight checks. 4 guards stood watch, scanning the perimeter. Sarah found her position behind a fuel tank 60 meters from the helipad. She unslung her father's M40A3, felt the weight of it settle into her hands like coming home. The rifle smelled of gun oil and old memories. She could almost feel her father's hands guiding hers, hear his voice, whispering instructions. Breathe, Firefly. Let the world slow down. Sarah extended the bipod, set up her shooting platform. Through the Schmidt and Bender scope, the world telescoped into crystalline clarity. She could see individual rivets on the helicopter's fuselage, could count the teeth in the pilot's nervous smile. The 2 SEALs with her engaged the guards with suppressed fire. Professional, controlled. The guards went down before they could raise an alarm. Then the command center's main doors exploded outward. Wade emerged at a dead run, flanked by 4 remaining loyal soldiers. He was carrying a metal briefcase, the kind designed to survive fires and explosions. Evidence. Proof of his treason. His insurance policy. The SEALs assaulting the front were engaged in a firefight that lit up the dawn with muzzle flashes and tracer rounds. Wade used the chaos as cover, sprinting for the helicopter. Sarah tracked him through the scope. 400 meters. Moving target. Dawn wind starting to pick up from the west. Wade reached the helicopter, hauled himself into the cabin. The pilot yanked on the collective and the Bell 412 lifted off, nose tilting forward to gain speed. Sarah's mind shifted into that cold, clear space where nothing existed except her, the rifle, and the target. The world slowed. Her heartbeat became a metronome. She calculated without conscious thought. Wind speed 14 miles per hour, gusting to 18. Temperature 64 degrees Fahrenheit. Humidity 52%. The helicopter was accelerating, moving at approximately 45 knots on a heading of 270 degrees, distance to target 847 yards. The shot was impossible. A moving helicopter at nearly half a mile in gusty dawn wind with the pilot taking evasive maneuvers. But Sarah had been making impossible shots since she was 8 years old. She adjusted for windage. 2.1 MOA right. Elevation 8.3 MOA up. Lead 12 inches to account for the helicopter's lateral movement. The Coriolis effect at this latitude negligible but present. Wade's face appeared in the helicopter's side window. He was looking back at the base, at the firefight still raging at the command center. Looking at what he was leaving behind, he never saw what was coming. Sarah exhaled slowly, let her breath carry away all doubt, all fear, all hesitation. At the bottom of her breath, in that moment of perfect stillness between heartbeats, she squeezed the trigger. The M40A3 roared. The .308 Winchester round traveled at 2,600 feet per second, covering 847 yards in 1.8 seconds. It punched through the helicopter's side window, through Colonel Dalton Wade's skull, and out the opposite side. Wade slumped forward and the pilot panicked. The helicopter yawed hard to the left, rotors biting air at the wrong angle. It spun once, twice, then fell from the sky like a broken bird. The crash was spectacular. Metal and fuel and flesh meeting concrete at terminal velocity. The explosion that followed was almost anticlimactic. Sarah lowered the rifle, her hands perfectly steady. "Tango down," she said quietly. James's voice crackled over the radio. "Confirmed. All hostiles neutralized. Command center secure." "Sarah, are you?" "I'm fine." She stood slinging the M40A3 across her back. "It's over." But it wasn't. Not quite. 96 hours later, Sarah stood in Section 60 of Arlington National Cemetery, the section reserved for casualties from Iraq and Afghanistan. The morning was cold and clear frost, still clinging to the grass between rows of white headstones that stretched to the horizon. She'd been granted emergency leave. James stood beside her in his dress blues, his hand warm in hers. Lieutenant Callahan and the rest of SEAL Team 5 formed a semicircle behind them, silent witnesses. Master Chief Nathaniel Flint Brennan's headstone was simple. Name, rank, dates of service. The words "Killed in Action, Ramadi, Iraq" etched in clean letters. Sarah knelt, placed the Navy Cross she'd been awarded on the cold marble. The citation had called her actions extraordinary heroism in the face of overwhelming odds. It had mentioned the 7 hostiles killed, the SEAL team rescued, the treasonous operation dismantled. It hadn't mentioned what it cost her, what it cost everyone. "Dad," she said softly. "I finished it. Wade's dead. Everyone who helped him is either dead or in custody. The weapons are secured. Your brothers are safe." The wind picked up, carrying the faint scent of cut grass and distant rain. James kept his promise. He looked out for me, protected me. But you taught me to protect myself. You taught me everything I needed to survive. Her voice cracked. "I just wish you could have seen it. Wish you could have been there." James's hand tightened on her shoulder. "He was there," James said quietly. "Every shot you made, every decision, every moment you could have quit but didn't. That was all him, Sarah. That was Nathaniel Brennan's legacy." Sarah stood turned to face the assembled SEALs. These men who'd fought alongside her father, who'd kept fighting after he died, who represented everything he'd believed in. They saluted as one, crisp, perfect, a final honor. Sarah returned the salute, tears streaming down her face. The sun broke through the clouds, painting Arlington in shades of gold and amber. Somewhere a bugler began playing taps, the mournful notes floating across the sacred ground. Sarah closed her eyes and listened. 20 years of carrying grief. 20 years of wondering if she could ever be strong enough, brave enough, worthy enough of the man who'd raised her. Now she knew. She was Nathaniel Brennan's daughter, and that was enough. When she opened her eyes again, the sun was higher, the day brighter. James took her hand, and together they walked between the rows of white stones, leaving the past behind and stepping into whatever future awaited. Behind them, SEAL Team 5 rendered one final salute to their fallen brother. The dead could rest now. The living had work to do, and Sarah Catherine Brennan was ready.